Bah! Look out! The pong of election 19 is hardly cleared and bad Boris is already bojoing around in the building behind me. So what's he got planned for the countryside in 2020? Let's start with the good news. We had a good election. The electorate rejected the antis. Out went a pile of nasty, jealous animal rights activists, including Ruth George from High Peak in Derbyshire, who was trying to ban grouse shooting, Zac Goldsmith from Richmond Park, who set up the consultation that still threatens not only the import of hunting trophies but also the export of horn walking sticks and antler buttons. And the best one, former hunt saboteur Chris Williamson, who was deselected by the Labour Party for anti-Semitic comments, went on to stand as an independent and lost his deposit. Back in came a raft of hunting stalwarts, and we have the good news that former Countryside Alliance boss Simon Hart is now in the Cabinet as Welsh Secretary. But it is a long time since the entire Cabinet left Parliament to go grouse shooting in August, and the new lot have a lot of ignorance about country sports and a lot of country sports to rule on over the next 6 months. There's a general licences consultation. It ended in December. DEFRA, Natural England and of course the regional governments have all got to rule on what general licences will look like next year. Can we shoot pigeons and rooks? There's the hunting tourism consultation, which ends in January. Its architect, Zac Goldsmith, was voted out of Richmond Park at the general election, but he appears to be back as a Lord, presumably to push through a Boris ban on commercial deer stalking. And then north of the border, this week we're expecting to have the Werrity report on grouse shooting and the Forestry Commission report on the future of deer in Scotland. There's a great deal to do. Here's what Neil Parish, newly re-elected MP for Tiverton and Honiton, has to say.
The general licences probably, I have to sort of be, if I want to be fair, probably have been a little bit abused. And so therefore I think there's a reason for tightening them up, but I don't want them too tight. And I don't think I don't really need to work out whether the intention of the pigeon or the rook is honourable. And so therefore I think, we have to be practical when we deliver this. If we have vermin and we have crows and rooks and pigeons taking out our arable crops, if we have them attacking crows and attacking lambs, that we can take the necessary action and make sure that it's not too bureaucratic.
There is an industry where people, especially from Belgium, France, Germany, come over here to shoot pigeons, particularly in Fife and Buckinghamshire. Are you against that?
I think as long as those that come actually comply to our licences and comply to make sure they shoot what they're allowed to shoot and don't shoot others, then I don't see a problem with that. It's a commercial decision.
We are really pushing hard for a coherent and, most importantly, very workable system of general licences. What we're spending a lot of time dealing with at the moment and pushing the Secretary of State at DEFRA and her whole team in making sure that there's not something like the debacle that happened last April, where at the most crucial time of year, wildlife managers who do so much to preserve our flora and fauna are rendered ineffective and kind of null and void. And so I think the overarching message for the general licence is be evidence-led, don't make decisions on sentiment and what you feel is kind of popular opinion when that's far from the case, and work with various organisations such as ourselves and the scientific organisations like the GWCT to develop really workable solutions that enable wildlife managers to get on with their job and be effective.
Is it more complicated, or particularly for you, more expensive having to deal with environment as a devolved issue across 4 regional governments?
Yeah, it's certainly more expensive. We need obviously people who are close to 4 governments rather than close to 1, and certainly we're very, very, very concerned about the situation of general licences in Wales in particular. The removal of rooks, for example, is totally unprecedented, has no grounding in evidence as far as we can see. NRW refused to listen to the evidence that was presented by us, the Game Conservancy, the British Trust for Ornithology. It was, as far as we could see, completely dismissed, and we have freedom of information requests in and pending on that decision-making process.
Of course, you've got devolved administrations which might actually have different policies, and so the environment won't change when you cross the borders into Scotland or into Wales or Northern Ireland. And so I think let's actually draw up policies where they're similar in all of the devolved countries, because otherwise it just will not work.
It's going to be a tough time for the lobbyists in the main shooting organisations. They went into the general election without a single positive, supportive comment in any of the main parties' manifestos.
We spoke to the Conservative Party at length about putting something into their manifestos that really recognised the contribution of shooting and hunting to the rural community and to the rural economy, and we were very disappointed that there was nothing in there on shooting, and that the thing that came in on hunting was the exact opposite of what we were looking for. We did organise and mobilise our membership along with the other organisations to write to every single parliamentary candidate from all parties, and we've got a database now which will be incredibly useful, knowing where they stand on issues such as shooting, hunting and wildlife management.
Well, for the first time since the Tony Blair's ban came in, not only did they not promise to repeal the ban, they actually put in a line saying we will not repeal the ban. I mean, surely that's not a big positive for the Countryside Alliance.
No, you're completely right, and we really wish that that wasn't included. However, there has been a really big win in terms of what we've been lobbying for a number of years, in that they are introducing much tighter restrictions on criminal trespass, and so that's a really huge step forward in terms of the police having the power to get rid of shoot or hunt saboteurs on the day, and to enable people in the countryside to go about these lawful activities which bring so many benefits. So in terms of not repealing the Hunting Act, that is of course a blow, but in terms of hunting continuing as it does now, we've actually seen really positive step forward.
We were talking at one time of just doing like what's they call an SI, statutory instrument to alter the Hunting Act. There may be possibilities, but I think one would have to look at that. I have to say quite clearly it's probably not a priority, but what we don't want, we want to make sure that you can still make sure that country sports can actually survive.
Boris Johnson appointed his old Etonian chum Zac Goldsmith to the House of Lords this week to push through a ban on hunting tourism, as he makes clear in Parliament before the election in this video.
Broadly speaking, we're not looking for any long grass. This is a very serious consultation. Our intention is to resolve this issue once and for all, and not to waste any time at all. So it is a very serious consultation, and I will drive it through as fast as I possibly can.
BASC is to put its weight behind damage limitation lobbying on the hunting tourism issue.
One of the things on the horizon is the trophy hunting consultation, which is due to close towards the end of January. We need to make sure that the new MPs understand the benefits of shooting, and we make sure that our voice is heard around key issues like trophy hunting. So Christmas obviously on the horizon, but an awful lot of work to be done, and we're cracking on straight away.
We're very clear at the current consultation on trophy hunting. There are 4 options, and we are submitting a response to that that says leave it as it is. We think that CITES does a very good job. I think it's kind of eco-colonialism through and through, that there's no place for that kind of legislation, which has the potential to be firstly deeply damaging to wildlife populations abroad, and is punitive to governments which are not as well resourced as ours and are doing their best to manage their wildlife, and in many cases are doing an incredibly good job.
Zac Goldsmith has no views on poaching with this consultation. He wants to ban regulated hunting, which is what pays for wildlife conservation. So he wants to stop wildlife conservation in its tracks. He's saying nothing about poaching at all. Is that still?
That worries me, and I think therefore, before the final legislation is through, then I think we need to look at this very carefully, because as far as I'm concerned, it's the poaching that is the big issue.
Where will we be in 6 months' time? Let's ask Neil.
Well, I hope that there will be, with the final legislation, some practical aspects to it. And again, with deer, you've got to make sure that deer is not overpopulated. I farm still in Somerset, and the Quantock Hills has far too many deer, and sometimes they actually starve in the winter. And so therefore, like I said, even the League of Great School Sports, they had land, and they're completely overpopulated with deer. So you've got to have a reasonable stocking rate, and so therefore if you allow a lot of undergrowth, you have actually got fuel for fires, and I think that's what we really haven't quite got to grips with. So there might be an argument sometimes overpopulation. When it comes to re-welding, we must be careful what we wish for. And also, like I said, we've got to make sure that we keep a reasonable stocking rate, both of deer and sheep, and sometimes suckler cow on many of our hills and mountains, because that is what keeps the nature and the balance right.
The election may be over, but the lobbying keeps going on. This goes for everyone in the world, wherever you are. Contact your local MP or your local politician. Get them along to your ground to see where you hunt or shoot or fish. Politicians can be dim and they can be dumb, and they often vote against what they don't understand.